the accidental winner. There is a terrifying kind of silence that fills a home right before everything falls apart. It isn't the quiet of peace or comfort. It's the unnatural stillness that comes right before the storm hits, when you realize the person sitting across from you at the dinner table is no longer the person you married. My name is Elena. For 8 years, I built a life with David. David was a man driven by ambition, but burdened by bad luck, or at least, that was the story he always told me. When we first met in our mid-20s, he was full of grand ideas that never quite panned out. He tried starting a tech consulting firm, but it folded in 6 months. He invested in a small franchise, but his business partners backed out. Through every failed venture, every missed rent payment, and every sleepless night filled with his anxiety, I was the one who held the roof over our heads. I worked 45 hours a week as a mid-level manager at a logistics firm. I paid our rent, covered his lingering debts, and kept our small 2-bedroom suburban house running. I didn't mind the sacrifice. I loved him, and I truly believed in the old-fashioned idea that marriage meant standing by each other through the winter until spring arrived. Every evening, when he came home defeated, I would set a warm meal in front of him, rub his shoulders, and say, "It's okay, David. We are a team. As long as we have each other, we can start over as many times as it takes." He would look at me with soft, sad eyes, kiss my forehead, and reply, "Elena, you are the only reason I haven't given up. One day, I'm going to make all of this up to you. I swear I will give you the world." I believed him, but wealth has a strange way of testing a human heart. And when lightning finally struck, it didn't bring us closer together. It ripped us completely apart. It happened on a cold Friday evening in late November. David had spent $5 on a state lottery ticket at a gas station down the street, a silly habit he had kept up for years despite never winning more than $20. That night, while I was folding laundry in the living room, David was staring at his phone screen. Suddenly, his glass of water slipped from his hand and shattered across the hardwood floor. I jumped up, alarmed. "David, what happened? Are you okay?" He was pale. His eyes were wide, staring at the screen as if he had just seen a ghost. His hands were shaking so violently he could barely hold the phone. "Elena!" he whispered, his voice trembling. "Check the numbers. Read them to me. Quick!" I stepped over the broken glass, picked up his paper ticket from the table, and compared it to the numbers displayed on the state lottery app on his phone. 07, 14 to 22, 39 to 41. Powerball, 12. Every single number matched. We hadn't just won a small prize. David held the sole winning ticket for a $35 million jackpot. For 30 seconds, neither of us breathed. Then, David let out a wild, deafening scream of pure joy. He grabbed me by the waist, spun me around the living room, and began laughing hysterically. "We did it, Elena. We're rich. $35 million, he shouted, tears streaming down his face. "No more debt. No more working 40 hours a week. We're free." I cried tears of pure relief. I hugged him tightly, thinking of all the years of stress, the scraped-together bill payments, and the sacrifices we had made together. I thought, we finally made it. The hard times are over. How naive I was. The hard times hadn't ended, they were only just beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, the shift in David didn't happen overnight, but it moved like a quiet, creeping frost. Because state laws allowed jackpot winners to claim their prize through a designated legal entity or trust, David hired a high-profile asset lawyer to handle the lump sum payout. The total after taxes came out to roughly $19 million cash. At first, things seemed normal. We talked about buying a comfortable house, setting up a retirement fund, and donating to the local animal shelter where we had adopted our dog. But then, the money actually hit his private bank account. The moment the numbers on his banking app changed from 3 digits to 8 digits, the man I knew died. In his place stood a complete stranger. David started staying out late. He bought a $200,000 sports car without even telling me. He began wearing expensive tailored suits around the house, looking down at my modest clothes with a strange, subtle disdain. He stopped asking me about my day. He stopped touching my hand. When I tried to talk to him about our plans for the future, he brushed me off with sharp, cold impatience. "Elena, please. I'm dealing with wealth management firms and private bankers now," he said one evening, barely glancing up from his phone. "You wouldn't understand how high-level finance works. Just let me handle it. You wouldn't understand. The words felt like a slap in the face. I was the person who had managed our tight monthly budget for 8 years to keep us out of bankruptcy. But now that he was rich, my intelligence was suddenly beneath him. The real blow came 3 weeks after the money arrived. I came home early from work on a Thursday afternoon because I wasn't feeling well. The front door was unlocked. As I walked into the hallway, I heard David's voice coming from his home office upstairs. He was on speakerphone, laughing with someone. "Look, man," David was saying into the phone, his voice filled with an arrogant chuckle. "I'm not going to split $19 million with a woman who wears $20 shoes from Target. She was great for the struggle years, sure. But I'm in a different league now." My blood ran cold. I froze in the hallway, leaning against the wall, unable to move. A smooth female voice came over the speakerphone. A voice I recognized instantly as Vanessa, the sleek, 30-year-old financial consultant David had hired 2 weeks prior to manage his wealth accounts. "Are you sure your lawyer can handle the pre-claim paperwork, David?" Vanessa asked with a sultry laugh. "If she proves she supported you during the marriage, a divorce court might grant her half." "Don't worry," David replied smoothly. "My lawyer set up the legal trust in my brother's name before the official payout claim was filed with the Lottery Commission. On paper, I don't own the $19 million, the trust does. And since the ticket was claimed after I drafted the preliminary separation papers, she won't get a single dime. By the time she realizes what happened, I'll be living in Miami, and she'll be stuck with the mortgage on this outdated house." Vanessa laughed. "You're wicked, David. I love it." "I'm not wicked, Vanessa," David said, his tone turning ice cold. "I'm just taking what's mine. She served her purpose. Now it's time for me to enjoy my life." I stood in the dim hallway, staring at the floor. The room began to tilt. My chest felt as though it was collapsing under an unbearable weight. 8 years of my life. 8 years of paying his bills, believing his lies, comforting him when he cried, and sacrificing my own dreams to keep us alive. To him, I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a partner. I was just someone who had served her purpose during his broke years, ready to be tossed into the trash the moment he became rich. He thought he was clever. He thought by using his brother's name and a loophole in the lottery claim paperwork, he had successfully robbed me of my share and my dignity. He thought he had gotten away with it. I didn't scream. I didn't break down the office door. I turned around, walked out of the house as quietly as I had entered, and sat in my car in the driveway for an hour. The tears came first, a painful, burning wave of grief for the man I thought I loved. But as the rain began to fall against my windshield, the tears stopped. A cold, sharp realization settled deep inside my chest. David thought he was playing a high-stakes game of chess, but he had forgotten one very crucial detail. I was the one who had cleared out his car the morning after he bought that lottery ticket. I was the one who had scanned his documents, organized his receipts, and taken photos of his paperwork before his fancy lawyer even entered the picture. He thought he was home free, but he had left a trail behind him, and I was about to use every single piece of it to shut him down forever. When you realize that the person you trusted with your heart has treated you like disposable trash, something inside you quietly dies. But in its place, a cold, unbreakable resolve is born. I sat in my car in the rain for a full hour, watching the warm yellow light glowing from David's home office window upstairs. He was probably still up there with his expensive whiskey, laughing with Vanessa on speakerphone, planning his grand exit to Miami. He thought he was a mastermind. He thought that because he had hired a slick asset protection lawyer to claim the lottery jackpot through his brother's shell corporation, he had legally wiped my hands clean of the $19 million. What David didn't know, what his arrogant, greedy brain completely overlooked, was how that lottery ticket was actually bought. 3 days before the winning draw, David was broke. He didn't even have $5 in cash to buy gas, let alone a lottery ticket. He had asked me to stop by the gas station on my way home from work to pick up his favorite energy drink and a $5 Powerball ticket using my personal debit card. I still had the digital banking app on my phone. The transaction was logged clearly. November 18th, Shell Station, $8.50. And because I was an organized person who kept physical receipts for monthly budgeting, the paper receipt was safely stored inside my accordion folder in the hallway closet. That single transaction proved that the ticket was purchased using marital funds, funds earned entirely by my salary while he was unemployed. I wiped my cheeks, took 3 deep breaths, and stepped out of the car. I unlocked the front door, walked inside, and put on the performance of a lifetime. "David, I'm back," I called out, my voice sounding soft, tired, and completely innocent. Footsteps hurried down the stairs. David appeared at the landing, instantly putting on a concerned, fake smile. "Hey, babe, you're home early," he said, walking over and giving me a quick, careless pat on the shoulder. "Are you feeling okay? You look pale." Looking into his eyes was like looking at a stranger wearing my husband's skin. The man who used to hold me when I was stressed was now secretly calculating how to make me homeless. "Just a headache, David," I said softly, forcing a faint, helpless smile. Work was exhausting. "Did you hear anything back from the lottery commission today?" He cleared his throat, shifting his weight nervously. "Oh, that? Yeah, actually, my legal advisor gave me some bad news today, Elena." I blinked, playing along. "Bad news? What do you mean?" David sighed, putting on a grand display of disappointment. "It turns out, because of some legal technicalities with how the ticket was registered, the commission ruled that the claim was subject to heavily contested corporate tax debts from my old failed business. By the time the state takes its cut and the legal fees are settled, there's barely going to be anything left. Maybe $20,000 or $30,000. I sat on the edge of the couch, watching him lie to my face without a single flinch. He was setting up the narrative. He wanted me to believe we were still broke, so that when he served me divorce papers, I wouldn't fight for a jackpot I thought didn't exist. "Oh, David, I'm so sorry," I whispered, lowering my head so he couldn't see the dangerous spark in my eyes. "After all these years, I really thought our financial struggles were finally over." "Yeah, well, life isn't fair, Elena," he said, his voice cold and indifferent as he turned back toward the stairs. "Anyway, I have an early morning meeting tomorrow with a financial planner. Don't wait up for me." "Okay, David," I said softly. The moment his office door clicked shut upstairs, I moved into action. I walked quietly into the hallway closet, pulled down my budget folder, and retrieved the original gas station receipt from November 18th. I took high-resolution photos of it, backed them up to 3 secure cloud servers, and placed the original receipt inside a sealed plastic bag inside my purse. Next, I went to his desk in the downstairs study, the desk he hadn't bothered to lock because he assumed I was too stupid to understand his business affairs. I opened his leather briefcase. Inside were preliminary drafts of the legal trust set up under his brother's name, Apex Holdings LLC. But right at the bottom, hidden beneath a stack of promotional brochures for Miami luxury penthouses, was a document that made my stomach turn. It was a drafted marital separation agreement. The agreement stated that Elena Vance would relinquish all rights to any future financial claims, spousal support, or corporate assets in exchange for full ownership of our small suburban house, a house that still had a $200,000 mortgage attached to it, which I would be solely responsible for paying. He wasn't just leaving me with nothing from the lottery. He was intentionally trapping me with the debt of the house we had lived in together, while he walked away with $19 million completely tax-free. I pulled out my phone, photographed every single page of the separation agreement, and carefully placed the folder back exactly as I had found it. The next morning, as soon as David drove off in his new sports car, I didn't go to work. I drove straight into the heart of the city's legal district. I had booked an appointment with Marcus Thorne, a legendary family law and asset recovery attorney known as the Pitbull of downtown. Marcus didn't handle messy emotional disputes. He handled high-stakes corporate divorces, hidden offshore accounts, and complex fraud. I sat in Marcus's sleek, glass-walled office on the 42nd floor. I didn't cry. I didn't complain about my broken heart. I simply laid out the evidence on his mahogany desk. The bank statement showing my debit card purchased the ticket. The physical receipt with the exact timestamp matching the lottery draw numbers. The photos of the drafted trust documents under his brother's name. The audio recording I had secretly captured on my phone from his home office conversation with Vanessa. Marcus put on his silver wire-rimmed glasses, reviewed the documents one by one, and listened to the recording. When the audio finished playing, he set his pen down and looked at me across the desk. A slow, predatory smile spread across the attorney's face. "Mrs. Vance," Marcus said, his voice deep and smooth, Your husband is not just arrogant. He is dangerously ignorant of marital property laws in the state. What do you mean? I asked, leaning forward. He believes that by placing the payout into an LLC registered under his brother's name before claiming the prize, he created a legal wall between the money and your marriage, Marcus explained, tapping the paper receipt. In reality, because this ticket was bought with marital funds during an active marriage, the winning ticket itself, and every single dollar generated from it, is 100% marital property. And his attempt to hide it through his brother? I asked. It's called fraudulent asset concealment and conspiracy to defraud a spouse, Marcus said, leaning back in his leather chair. If he had been honest and filed for divorce normally, the judge might have split the $19 million 50-50. But because he actively conspired with his brother and his financial consultant to hide the jackpot, a judge can strip him of his rights to the money entirely. I felt a cold rush of adrenaline surge through my blood. What is our next move, Mr. Thorne? Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Right now, your husband thinks he's playing you. Next week, he is scheduled to officially sign the final transfer deeds at the state lottery headquarters in front of the press and his new investors. Marcus's eyes gleamed with razor-sharp intensity. We are going to let him go to that signing, Marcus whispered. We are going to let him stand in front of the cameras, sign his brother's name, and feel like the richest man in the world. And right when he reaches for the pen, we are going to serve the emergency freeze injunction. To completely ruin a man who thinks he is untouchable, you must let him believe his plan is working perfectly. Over the next 2 weeks, I became the most submissive, quiet, and oblivious wife imaginable. Whenever David came home smelling of expensive cologne, dropping subtle hints about how he was moving on to bigger things, I simply nodded, made him dinner, and kept my mouth shut. Arrogance is a quiet killer. The more David believed I was a helpless fool, the more careless he became. He stopped hiding his phone. He left receipts for 5-star restaurants in Miami, sitting right on the kitchen counter. He even started bringing his brother, Rick, the co-conspirator in his little shell company scheme, over to our house to drink my coffee while they openly whispered about their upcoming multi-million-dollar real estate purchases. One evening, while I was serving them tea in the living room, Rick looked up at me with a fake, pitying smile. Elena, you really ought to look into getting a smaller apartment downtown, Rick said casually, taking a sip from his mug. David mentioned you might be downsizing soon. This house is just too big for one person to maintain, don't you think? I stood there holding the serving tray, looking at my brother-in-law. This was the same Rick who had borrowed $3,000 from my personal savings 2 years ago when his car was repossessed, money he had never paid back. Now, sitting in my living room, he was already talking about pushing me out of my own home. I forced a soft, sad smile onto my face, keeping my voice completely gentle. I suppose you're right, Rick, I said softly, looking down at the carpet. Life changes fast. I just hope whatever happens, everyone gets exactly what they deserve. David let out a loud, smug laugh, resting his arm over the back of the sofa. Oh, don't worry, Elena. Everyone gets what they work for. That's just the law of the world. Yes, David, I thought to myself, watching the two of them exchange a victorious glance. That is the law of the world, and you are about to receive your lesson in full. While David and Rick were busy celebrating their imaginary victory, my attorney, Marcus Thorne, was quietly weaving a legal net around them that was tighter than steel. Marcus didn't just file standard divorce papers. He filed an emergency ex parte motion with the State Financial Crimes Division and the State Lottery Gaming Commission, attaching the indisputable paper trail we had gathered. The time-stamped gas station receipt linked to my personal debit card. The bank records, showing my salary, was the sole source of income, funding our household at the time of purchase. The corporate filing history of Apex Holdings LLC, proving it was hastily created by David's brother just 4 days after the winning numbers were drawn. The voice recording detailing their explicit conspiracy to intentionally defraud a spouse during marital proceedings. When the chief investigator for the Lottery Commission reviewed the evidence, he was stunned by the sheer audacity of David's scheme. In our state, attempting to claim a lottery jackpot through a third-party shell corporation specifically to evade marital asset division or tax obligations wasn't just a civil violation, it was classified as felony wire fraud and grand larceny. The Lottery Commission, working in tandem with the state judge, made a crucial decision, They would not stop the official public ceremony. "If we freeze it now, Mrs. Vance," Marcus explained to me during a late-night meeting in his office, "his lawyers will claim it was a simple misunderstanding or a paperwork error. But if we let him walk up to that podium, sign the official affidavit claiming sole ownership under oath, and accept the ceremonial check in front of the press, he commits perjury and fraud live on camera." "And what happens to the $19 million? I asked, my voice steady. Marcus leaned back, resting his hands behind his head. The moment his pen touches that paper, the judge's freeze order activates. The entire $19 million will be impounded directly into a court-monitored escrow account. He won't get a single penny. And because he committed felony fraud under oath, the judge will have full authority to award the entire jackpot to you as restitution. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep, quiet breath. I didn't want to destroy David out of hatred. I wanted to destroy him because he had looked at 8 years of my sacrifice, my devotion, and my love, and decided that I was worth nothing. He needed to learn that you cannot step on the human being who helped you survive just because you finally got a taste of power. The day before the public ceremony, David came home with a brand new $6,000 designer suit hanging in a silk garment bag. He hung it proudly in the master closet, admiring his reflection in the mirror as he adjusted a gold watch on his wrist, a watch he had bought using our joint credit line. "Tomorrow is the big day, Elena," he said, not even turning around to face me. "I have a big corporate meeting at the downtown convention center at 11 o'clock. Don't expect me back for dinner." "Is it an important meeting?" I asked, leaning against the doorway, watching him. "The most important meeting of my life," David smirked, straightening his silk tie. "It's the day my new life officially begins." "I see," I said softly, stepping closer to him. "You know, David, for 8 years, I always prayed that you would find the success you were looking for." "I really did." He paused for a fraction of a second, glancing at me in the mirror. For a tiny moment, a shadow of guilt crossed his face, but he quickly shook it off, hardening his expression once more. "Well, prayers don't pay the bills, Elena," he said coldly, picking up his car keys. "Results do. I'm going out to celebrate with Rick and Vanessa tonight. Don't call me." I watched a sports car roar down the driveway, its red taillights disappearing into the dark suburban night. I walked back into our bedroom, opened my closet, and pulled out a simple, elegant black dress, the dress I had chosen for the grand unveiling tomorrow morning at the state lottery headquarters. I pulled out my phone and sent a short, one-line text to Marcus Thorne. "The target is fully committed. Everything is set for 11 a.m. tomorrow." 3 seconds later, Marcus replied, "The trap is locked, Elena. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you take back your life." The auditorium at the state gaming and lottery headquarters was buzzing with energy. Camera crews from 4 local news networks had set up heavy equipment along the center aisle. Bright white spotlights illuminated the grand stage, where a massive, 5-foot-long ceremonial check was propped up on a wooden easel. It read in bold gold letters, "Paid to the order of Apex Holdings LLC, $19 million. Sitting in the front row, wearing his brand new $6,000 suit, was David. Next to him sat his brother Rick, beaming with a wide, arrogant smile, and Vanessa, who was wearing a sleek red designer dress, looking at David like he was the center of the universe. They were whispering, laughing, and sipping sparkling water, completely drunk on the high of their imminent fortune. They had no idea that I was standing in the dark observation gallery at the back of the auditorium, wearing an understated black dress, accompanied by Marcus Thorne and 2 plainclothes investigators from the State Financial Crimes Bureau. "Are you ready, Elena?" Marcus asked quietly beside me, adjusting his silver glasses. "I've been ready for 8 years, Marcus," I replied, my voice calm, steady, and without a trace of hesitation. At exactly 11 a.m., the state lottery commissioner stepped up to the podium, tapping the microphone to quiet the crowd. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen of the press," the commissioner announced, his voice echoing through the speakers. "Today, we are thrilled to officially present the $19 million jackpot claim to the designated corporate entity, Apex Holdings LLC, represented today by Mr. David Vance and Mr. Richard Vance." The auditorium erupted into applause. Flashbulbs strobed frantically across the stage like a sudden lightning storm. David stood up from his front row seat, buttoning his tailored jacket with a smooth, theatrical flourish. He gave Vanessa a soft kiss on the cheek, shook hands with Rick, and strutted up the carpeted stairs to the stage like a king claiming his throne. He walked to the podium, resting his hands on the microphone, beaming at the cameras. "Thank you, everyone," David said, his voice dripping with false humility. "You know, they say hard work and vision pay off. I've spent years grinding in silence, building my dreams from the ground up, waiting for my moment. And today, that vision becomes reality." From the back room, I listened to him talk about his hard work. Not a single mention of the wife who had paid his rent, bought his groceries, and sacrificed her youth to fund his failed life. The commissioner gestured to a large leather-bound legal ledger resting on a side table. "Before we hand over the symbolic check, Mr. Vance, as the primary corporate officer of Apex Holdings, you must sign the official state claim affidavit under oath, confirming under penalty of perjury that this claim contains no hidden marital, tax, or third-party liabilities." "Of course," David smiled arrogantly. He took the heavy gold pen from the official, leaned over the table, and signed his name across the legal affidavit in big, sweeping strokes. The moment his pen lifted off the paper, the side doors of the auditorium swung wide open. "David Vance!" A deep, authoritative voice boomed across the hall, cutting through the applause like a knife. The room froze. Camera crews instinctively spun their lenses away from the stage and pointed them toward the main aisle. Walking down the center carpet were 4 uniformed officers from the Financial Crimes Division, led by Marcus Thorne. I walked right behind them, my head held high, stepping into the glaring white spotlights of the stage. David's smile vanished. The color drained completely from his face. His hands began to shake as his eyes locked onto mine. "Elena!" David gasped into the open microphone, his voice cracking violently. What are you doing here?" Marcus Thorne stepped up to the base of the stage, pulling a crisp, red-stamped court order from his leather briefcase. "My name is Marcus Thorne, legal counsel representing Mrs. Elena Vance," Marcus announced, his voice carrying effortlessly to every corner of the silent hall and straight into the live news microphones. "I am serving an emergency superior court injunction for felony wire fraud, tax evasion, and intentional concealment of marital assets." A sharp, collective gasp echoed across the auditorium. Reporters began scribbling furiously on their pads as camera shutters clicked like gunfire. "What is the meaning of this?" Rick shrieked, jumping up from his front row seat, his face bright red. "This is a private corporate claim. She has no right to be here." "Mr. Richard Vance," Marcus said coldly, turning his gaze toward my brother-in-law, "you are named as a co-conspirator in federal shell company fraud. I suggest you sit back down before you add obstruction of justice to your indictment." Rick immediately sank back into his chair, looking utterly terrified. David stood glued to the stage, looking back and forth between the police officers, the legal documents, and me. "Elena, this is a mistake. Tell them it's a mistake. You don't understand how high-level finance works." I stepped out from behind the officers, walking slowly up the stage stairs until I stood just 5 feet away from him. "I understand finance very well, David," I said, my voice quiet, clear, and perfectly captured by the podium microphone. "I understand that on November 18th at 6:14 p.m., I bought the winning Powerball ticket using my personal debit card and my hard-earned money while you were sitting on the couch." I held up a high-resolution, laminated copy of the gas station receipt, complete with the bank authorization code matching my name. "And I also understand," I continued, taking a step closer to him, "that you spent the last 3 weeks conspiring with your brother and your mistress to hide $19 million of marital property so you could leave me homeless with a $200,000 debt." The room erupted into shocked whispers. Vanessa covered her face with her luxury leather handbag, trying desperately to hide from the news cameras that were now inches away from her face. The lead financial crimes investigator stepped up onto the stage, producing a pair of steel handcuffs. "David Vance," the officer stated firmly, "because you just signed a sworn state affidavit under oath claiming sole ownership of a ticket purchased with marital funds, knowing an active asset fraud investigation was underway, you are under arrest for perjury and grand larceny." "No! Wait! Listen to me!" David screamed, stumbling backward into the giant easel. The massive $19 million ceremonial check tipped over, crashing loudly onto the hardwood floor of the stage. The officers grabbed David's arms, pulling him forward and snapping the cold metal handcuffs around his wrists. The man who had stood there 2 minutes ago feeling like an untouchable billionaire was now sobbing, his tailored $6,000 suit rumpled and ruined, as police escorted him down the center aisle in front of national media. As he was dragged past me, David looked at me with wild, desperate, tear-filled eyes. "Elena! Please!" he begged, his voice cracking into a pathetic sob. I was confused. "Vanessa tricked me. I love you, Elena. Don't do this to us." I looked at the man I had spent 8 years protecting. I felt no hatred. I felt no rage. I only felt the quiet, peaceful closure of a woman who had finally reclaimed her soul. "There is no us, David," I whispered as the officers led him away into the flashing blue lights waiting outside. "Consider your vision complete. When the dust of a sudden public collapse settles, the silence that follows is deafening." The news of the lottery fraud scandal dominated local broadcasts for a solid week. The image of David being led away from the press conference in handcuffs, with the giant $19 million check lying face down on the stage floor, became a national meme. For David, the nightmare was just beginning. Because he had signed a legal state document under oath, claiming sole corporate ownership of a ticket bought with marital funds, the district attorney took a hardline stance. The state wasn't interested in making a deal. David was charged with felony grand larceny, wire fraud, and perjury. While David sat in a cold county jail cell awaiting his bail hearing, the grand illusion he had built around himself instantly shattered into pieces. First went Vanessa. The moment the legal freeze hit the $19 million, Vanessa realized there was no private jet, no luxury penthouse in Miami, and no secret offshore accounts waiting for her. When David tried to call her from the jail's collect phone, the automated operator informed him that the number had been disconnected. Vanessa packed her designer bags, resigned from her wealth management firm to avoid public embarrassment, and left the state altogether. She had never cared about David. She had only cared about the zero on his bank balance. The moment the money disappeared, she vanished like smoke. Then came his brother, Rick. Because Rick had willingly registered Apex Holdings LLC under his name to facilitate the fraudulent transfer, he was named as a co-defendant in the civil fraud lawsuit filed by Marcus Thorne. The court froze Rick's personal bank accounts pending a full forensic audit. Rick was forced to hire his own criminal defense lawyer, completely depleting his modest personal savings. The brother who had sat on my couch drinking my coffee, advising me to downsize into a small apartment, was now facing total financial ruin and potential probation. 4 months after that fateful day at the lottery headquarters, our civil divorce trial reached its conclusion. Inside the quiet, dignified atmosphere of the Superior Court, there were no press cameras or bright lights, only a stern judge looking over a mountain of indisputable evidence. David stood next to his court-appointed attorney, looking pale, defeated, and broken. He had lost 20 pounds. His tailored $6,000 suit hung loosely over his frail frame, and he couldn't even bring himself to look me in the eye. Marcus Thorne stood beside me, presenting our final arguments to the court. "Your Honor," Marcus stated firmly, his voice echoing through the quiet courtroom. The defendant did not simply make an error in judgment. He executed a deliberate, calculated, and fraudulent scheme to deprive his wife of her rightful marital share after 8 years of her financial and emotional support. Under state civil code, when a spouse actively conceals a marital asset through fraud, the court holds the power to award the entire asset to the injured party. The judge slowly flipped through the forensic accounting records, the timestamped gas station receipt, and the recorded phone calls. Then, he looked down at David with cold, unyielding eyes. "Mr. Vance," the judge said, his voice dropping like an iron gavel. "In my 22 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a display of financial bad faith as egregious as this. You took the sacrifice of a loyal partner and attempted to weaponize corporate shell games to render her destitute." The judge picked up his fountain pen, signing the final decree. "The court hereby orders that 100% of the $19 million lottery jackpot, after standard state and federal withholdings, be awarded exclusively to Mrs. Elena Vance as restitution for marital fraud and bad faith asset concealment." A heavy silence filled the courtroom. David let out a choked, ragged breath, collapsing backward into his chair, covering his face with his trembling hands. He didn't just lose his freedom. He lost every single cent he had tried so ruthlessly to steal. As the court adjourned and people began gathering their coats, David's attorney whispered something to him. David slowly pushed his chair back, stood up, and shuffled toward me across the carpeted floor. "Elena," he whispered, his voice hoarse, raw, and trembling with desperate emotion. "Please, just look at me." I turned slowly to face him. "I lost everything," David sobbed, tears spilling down his hollow cheeks. "The money, my reputation, my family. They're giving me 2 years of probation and community service, Elena. I have to move back into my parents' basement. I have nothing left." I looked at him, the man who had occupied my heart for nearly a decade, and felt a profound sense of clarity. "You had everything, David," I said softly, my voice quiet and calm. "You had a home. You had loyalty. You had someone who loved you when you had $5 in your bank account. But greed made you blind. You thought money was the thing that made you powerful, but it only revealed who you truly were all along." "Can you ever forgive me?" he choked out, reaching a hand out toward me. I took a step back, maintaining my distance. "I forgive myself for taking so long to see who you really were," I told him, looking him straight in the eyes. "And that is all the forgiveness the story needs." Without another word, I turned away, picked up my briefcase, and walked down the marble corridor of the courthouse toward the sunlight streaming through the front doors. When the roar of the storm finally subsides, the light that breaks through is cleaner, brighter, and more peaceful than anything you knew before. 3 months after the judge signed the final decree, the official transfer of the lottery payout went through. After state and federal withholdings, just over $11 million was cleared into a private, secure account created solely in my name. People often ask what it feels like to wake up one morning with millions of dollars in your bank account. If this money had come to me 8 years ago, or even 6 months ago under different circumstances, I might have felt an overwhelming urge to buy expensive clothes, flash luxury cars, or move into a sprawling mansion to show the world that I had made it. But betrayal has a strange way of recalibrating your values. The first thing I did with the money was simple. I paid off the remaining mortgage on my house. Then, I submitted my 2 weeks' notice at the logistics firm where I had spent years working long overtime hours. My manager was stunned, but I shook her hand, thanked her for the opportunity, and walked out of the building with a peaceful smile. I didn't buy a flashy sports car. I didn't move to Miami. Instead, I used a portion of the funds to launch a nonprofit trust dedicated to providing legal assistance, housing support, and financial literacy training for women who find themselves trapped in financially abusive relationships. I wanted to ensure that no woman would ever have to sit in silence, watching someone strip away her dignity simply because she lacked the resources to fight back. As for David, his life became a living caution tape for anyone who let sudden greed swallow their humanity. With 2 years of felony probation, a permanent record for fraud, and 0 financial assets, David was forced to take a minimum wage job managing inventory in a local warehouse, the very kind of modest, blue-collar work he used to mock when he wore his tailored suits. He moved into a small room in his parents' basement. The friends who had once hovered around him when they thought he was a multimillionaire vanished into thin air. Rick, bound by his own legal debts, barely spoke to him anymore, blaming David for dragging his name into a federal investigation. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, 6 months after the trial, I was sitting at an outdoor cafe near the city park, sipping warm tea and going over the monthly reports for my nonprofit foundation. As I looked up, I saw a familiar figure walking down the sidewalk across the street. It was David. He was wearing a faded jacket with frayed cuffs, carrying a worn canvas bag, walking through the light drizzle toward the bus stop. He looked tired, aged far beyond his years, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his reality. For a brief second, he paused and looked across the street. His eyes locked onto mine. He didn't move. He didn't try to cross the street. He didn't shout or raise his hand. He just stood there under the gray sky, looking at me sitting in the quiet warmth of the cafe, holding the life he could have shared if he had chosen loyalty over greed. I didn't glare at him. I didn't smile triumphantly. I simply took a sip of my tea, gave him a small, polite nod of acknowledgement, and turned back to my work. The bus pulled up to the curb, clouding the street in white steam. When it drove away, the sidewalk was empty. Glowing star moral reflection, voiceover conclusion. Money is neither good nor bad. It is simply a magnifying glass. If you give wealth to a person of integrity, it magnifies their kindness, their generosity, and their capacity to protect the people they love. But if you give wealth to a person driven by hidden arrogance and weak character, it will magnify their flaws until it destroys everything they hold dear. David thought he was clever. He thought by using loopholes, lawyers, and secrecy, he could discard the person who had stood by him when he had nothing. But he forgot the oldest law of the universe. What you build on deceit will eventually crush you when it falls. To anyone listening to this story who is currently going through a season of betrayal, heartbreak, or quiet sacrifice, do not lose heart. Never let someone else's cruelty turn your heart bitter. Keep your head high, protect your dignity, and let your silence do the work. Because when the truth comes to light, justice isn't just served, it resets the entire board.